Revere POV. The last thing Revere expected was to be invited to go cave exploring with the Empress. But here she was, following the shepherd as he led the way to the Spitterwolf den. During the walk, her curiosity got the better of her as she spoke up. "Shepherd, what exactly are we going to be doing here?" Zassatir glanced back and flashed a fanged smile. Vedmori asked her any questions to be reserved until the end of the tour. At that, Historietta snickered softly with amusement. And while Revere did get the joke thanks to having an understanding of Earth humour, she was vaguely annoyed at being kept in the dark. Before long, they reached the den, the mouth of the cave being defended by two healthy-looking spitterwolves, the wolves standing as Zassatir approached before sitting down and relaxing, seemingly allowing them to pass. "It's such a shame that most wildlife around here is so aggressive in nature. I would love to have a spitterwolf to raise and care for. They're such beautiful beasts that are the best of both worlds," Historietta said, with mildly exaggerated disappointment. Revere looked at the Empress, curiously, as they walked, passing through the first room and making their way deeper into the den. "What do you mean by the best of both worlds? Do you have something similar back in your old world?" "I wish," Historietta mused with a smile, as she looked over to Revere. "No, I mean that spitterwolves are the best combination of good fluffy boys and cool scaly boys," she gushed. "I would love to see a puppy of them, but that might be asking for too much." Revere considered this, and she had to admit she could understand the appeal. "Well, they certainly are cute when they're young," she mentioned, flashing a bemused expression over to the Empress. Historietta gasped, before flashing an excited grin as she stepped closer. "So you do get it. I knew we could be friends," she teased before chuckling softly, though she got quiet as she watched a massive spitterwolf come up to meet the group. "Oh, it's Legosi. Hello," she said, as she gave an excited wave to the spitterwolf. Legosi was confident in his approach, though his ears did pull back for a moment at the excited woman, remembering how aggressively forward she was the other day. However, he collected himself as he looked at Zassatir and offered a wolfish smile. "Welcome, Shepherd. What's going on?" he asked simply, as he sat back and looked between the trio, his tail slowly wagging as he waited. Zassatir smiled as he gestured to the two women. "Vedmori asked me to take them downstairs, and he feels they might know more about the situation than he does." Legosi bobbed his head in understanding. "Ah, okay. So you're going to the room where I found my cool stick. My cool sword," he stated, before correcting himself as he glanced happily at the sword strapped to his side. "I'll come with," he said simply, as he just invited himself, before looking at a certain she-wolf, the she-wolf bobbing her head as Legosi looked back to Zassatir. "Let's go," he called to the trio, as he stood and led the way, scampering off deeper into the den before leading them down a hallway, which led to a set of stairs. "Whoa," Historietta said softly, as she looked down the staircase before following along with the others. "This place feels old, like really old." She then flashed a bit of a smile. "I almost feel like Indy exploring some lost ruins," she mainly mused to herself, as they passed by traps that had already been triggered and cleared. Revere had to think about that for a moment before speaking up. "Are you perhaps referring to Indiana Jones, an academic adventurer who explores ancient ruins while often fighting with evil humans?" Historietta looked pleasantly surprised by Revere getting her reference, and flashed a smile as she glanced back at the elf. "You know about Indiana Jones?" she asked, with a healthy mix of delight and curiosity. Revere tilted side to side before offering a bit of a smile. "I know of him, at least. Vedmori read several books detailing his adventures." Historietta smiled some more as they turned ahead, eventually coming down to a chamber with a clear spring. Looking around at the old architecture, she looked curiously at a few things before coming across the spring. Whoa, that's a whole lot of ooze. Revere looked over, curiously, vaguely intrigued as she looked between the Empress and the spring. How can you tell? It looks nearly indistinguishable from water. Historietta scratched her cheek as she averted her gaze. I just have an eye for these things, she mentioned, before offering a sheepish smile. Revere felt she was hiding something, but it wasn't her place to question it, as she looked to see Zassutir waiting patiently for them at the other end of the room. Sorry, Shepherd, we're coming, she said, as she made her way over, Historietta following close behind as they crossed the threshold into the next room. Is this? Historietta was speechless, as she glanced between Zassutir and Revere. Before anyone could respond, Legosi called out from atop the massive, cracked dungeon core. This is where I found my stick! Vidmori called out within them soon after. This is the core of the person before me, and she was from another world like Historietta and myself. Revere and Historietta share a glance, though Revere steps forward as she begins to look around. So, this is Lictrin's chamber. This must also be where the final battle took place, she exclaimed excitedly, having heard the stories of what might have happened, though she stopped in her tracks as she stroked her chin thoughtfully. Wait, was she an otherworlder? How'd you know this? She asked, as she looked around the room, not entirely sure where to face to address Vidmori, who was now obviously in the room with them. After a few moments, a dim ball of green light appeared in the room and floated around before coming down in front of Historietta and Revere. Because she was still around until a few days ago, damaged and unable to repair her core, I also found her room, not to mention that she's sitting right here, he explained, the ball of light coasting across the room before hovering above the strangely serene-looking skeleton sitting on the throne. Oh my, I can't even imagine being trapped and alone for over 600 years, Revere said sadly, still not entirely sure what to make of everything here, as she began looking over the room, Historietta breaking off to do her own examination. At the same time, Zassutir settled down on some rubble. How do you know it's been 600 years? Vidmori asked, his curiosity evident to Revere as she glanced over at the ball of light. Well, that's because it was around when my grandmother was alive. She knew of Lictrin and the plan to destroy it. I mean, her, she corrected herself, as she looked at the skeleton that was on the throne before stepping away. She only heard about it indirectly, though. A majority of elven tribes were isolated and kept themselves separate from the matters of the short-lived. She pauses, as she comes across the woman with the circlet melted into her skull. Her eyes widen, and she continues to speak. That didn't stop the humans from convincing a tribe of elves and dwarves to procure a hero from their people and outfit them for battle. This right here was the elven hero. I don't remember all the details, but this equipment reminds me of what I read about the Arcane Aegis, a specifically woven armor designed to resist all forms of intangible magic. Though she obviously didn't wear it right, or she might have made it out alive, she explained derisively, as she shook her head at the ancient elf corpse before stepping away. Historietta spoke up from the other end of the room. I found the dwarven hero. Poor bastard got half crushed but didn't have the good fortune to die right away, she said, as she tapped the armoured corpse with her foot. So where is the human hero? Revere pondered aloud as she looked around. He's probably this black burn spot on the ceiling, Vidmori chimed in, the ball of light rising up to the ceiling to illuminate a shadowy outline of a humanoid shape, a fiery red spear embedded centre mass to the stain. Ah, yeah, that's probably it, Revere said simply, looking more impressed at what happened than anything else. Historietta looked around quietly, coming from where the stain on the ceiling was before glancing back down to the cracked core, and then back up to Legosi, who was sitting atop the core. She offered the Spittlewolf a smile and waved up at him. "Oh, Legosi, come down here for a moment. Can you show me your sword, please?" she cooed to the wolf. Legosi's tail began to wag curiously, before excitedly making his way down. Sure. Do you also want to see how cool it is?" he asked excitedly, reaching around with his teeth as he grabbed the handle, drawing the blade as it hummed with life, as he swished it around before slowing to a stop, so that she could look at it. Historietta flashed a smile, though she slowly reached out and gently patted the top of Legosi's head fur, taking a moment to relish how fluffy it was. Legosi appeared anxious for a brief moment, but at the petting he closed his eyes and slowly leaned into it. Once she pulled away, he opened his eyes and watched her curiously as she examined his sword. "This is the Vorpal blade, an enchanted mithril blade of human design. It makes it easy for the wielder to cut through most materials, and the singing the blade does when it is swung causes the blade itself to vibrate intensely and make wounds very hard to heal," she explained methodically, almost as if she was reading something. Legosi's ears drooped again as she listened to Historietta speak. "Does that mean I can't keep my sword? Does it belong to someone else?" he asked, a hint of a whimper in his throat, as he watched her. Historietta smiled kindly as she affectionately rubbed the top of Legosi's head. No, the sword is yours. The owners of this blade are long dead, so nobody can take it from you," she explained reassuringly, as Legosi's tail began to wag excitedly as he hopped around cheerfully, the sword humming and whirring with each sway. Rayveer flashed a small smile at Legosi, before looking at Vidmori's ball of light. "So you said you found Lictrin's room, and that this skeleton used to be Lictrin herself. Does this mean she can make herself a body?" "Like an avatar of some kind," Historietta chimed in. Vidmori doesn't answer, as the ball of light flits out of the room and returns the way they came. Zassatir stands and follows, as everyone else makes their way out. The ball of light went across the spring of ooze and parted the wall to reveal what looked to be a bedroom inside. The others don't really make a move, unsure of how to make it over to the room, until a stone bridge starts to form between them. "Sorry, I almost forgot that you all need to walk to make your way across." Rayveer smiled with relief as she crossed the stone bridge. "Thank you, Vidmori," she enthused, before looking around the room with surprise at how typical it seems. She spotted a small drawing that wasn't really a drawing, and looked it over. This was Lictrin, but she looks like a normal person. How could this be the dread dungeon of undead and monstrosities that threatened to bring ruin to the land? Rayveer pondered aloud, looking the picture over thoughtfully. She was a German, too, Historietta mentioned casually, as she picked up some drawings for a wooden person of some kind. "Oh? So you know German?" Vidmori asked, the anticipation nearly palpable in his thoughts. Well, no, not exactly," Historietta said, sheepishly scratching the back of her head. "It's thanks to one of my skills. I learned multiple languages back on Earth for various reasons, so that allowed me to be granted a linguist skill when I got granted the system. I'm technically still developing it, but for now I can at least read any language. Eventually I should be able to understand and speak any language, but that's not in my immediate future." "So you're saying if I had bothered to learn more languages, then I might not have even had this issue?" Vidmori sounded noticeably annoyed, but more tired than anything, as the ball of light swirled around over Historietta's head. "Hey, you don't have any right to complain," she mused, with a smirk on her face, as she glanced up at the ball of light. "You've got 4 times as many titles as I do. It's not my fault you maxed out your combat and utility skills. I'm just lucky to have a strong enough build to make my way for a political drama, rather than your city builder survival sim." She chuckled to herself as she looked over the paper some more. Anyways, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like these were instructions to build a wooden soldier. The crystal in the chest would be filled with the instructions, and then it would be given autonomy. Revere barely understood any of that, still contemplating the history that she knew, but she made her way to Historietta and peeked over her shoulder, and hummed thoughtfully. Now, I'm no artificer, but I did spend a couple of decades studying magic tool creation and runic etching on a whim, so I should be able to put something like this together. Historietta looked over at Revere, appearing somewhat confused by the words that just came out of her mouth just now. 2 decades? On a whim? She echoed with uncertainty. Revere shrugged a bit. I mean, I did other things, of course. Well, if that's the case, there's a couple more rooms I want you all to check out, Vidmore started, as the ball of light heads out of the room, leading everyone back up before stopping in the empty chamber they passed through earlier. Only this time, another wall opened up, revealing an intricate workshop filled with all sorts of stations and unusual machines. Holy crap! What's a place like this doing in some cave? What the hell? She said excitedly, as she moved from one station to another, recognizing various things but not touching them. Revere looked over things more slowly, recognizing a few things here and there from Vidmore's memories, while other things didn't look too out of place in her own world. However, she stopped as she came across a station with a wooden soldier laid out across it, a blank command crystal just lying beside it, ready to be filled with instructions. Before she could do anything, she was interrupted by Vidmore's thoughts. I can tell what you want to do, and while I appreciate it, there are more important things to do right now. She sighed internally and nodded as she relented for the moment. All right, one more stop. This one I do need help with, he mentioned, as the orb of light made his way out of the room, leading everyone back up to the Spitterwolf den. Zassatir decided to excuse himself since he felt his role here was done, and Legosi went off since his curiosity was satisfied. When the orb of light led them to another wall, it began to open like the others before, slowly. Whoa! Look at this! Now this is high fantasy! A magic map table! Historietta exclaimed excitedly as she walked over, quickly examining it before approaching the console and looking things over. I see. So this thing can show the current state of things, but also record and then display previous events. She then noticed the slot for the crystals, her finger treading the edge of the slot as she looked around. Hey, Vidmore, do you know where I can find one of these things? Yeah, there's a couple of chests that are full of them over here, he mentioned, as the ball of light led her to another part of the room. Meanwhile, Revere's attention was drawn to the maps on the wall as well as the globe, having never seen the world like this before. Her interest grew as she recognized old nations and borders from her history studies that no longer existed. As she paged through maps and various documents written in a language she did not recognize, she found a crystal that was marked with a date just over 600 years ago. She plucked it up and looked it over curiously, nearly about to say something, when Historietta called in. Hey, Revere, come look at this! Historietta beckoned her over, as she fiddled with the console after sliding a crystal into the slot. Revere walked over, approaching the table as the sand fell flat, before rippling in waves and rising up once more. Before their eyes was a bustling little city encompassing the mountain. Hundreds of buildings littered the place, great farms with many fields that showed signs of crop rotation, and wild fields allowed to revitalize naturally. All accompanied by an impressive fortress wall surrounding the entirety of the city, with towers and gates set up equidistant along the perimeter to allow lots of traffic for people coming in and out. This was Lictron's Folly. It's amazing. It's almost as big as the Imperial capital city. She then looked at the crystal in her hand and held it to Historietta. Here, try this one next. Historietta, for her part, was using the console to scroll around the map, zooming in on buildings and other city sections, before noticing Revere holding another crystal. Oh, sure, she says, as she offers a pleasant smile, disconnecting the currently loaded crystal before comparing the two dates. These are 2 months apart, she commented, before loading the crystal up as she tapped away at the console. The sand fell flat before rippling as the display rose again. Why is everything on fire?